I built this ledge in Slab City to do one trick. My goal was to build the perfect setup for a Wally, ice, hard 180. But when I got the idea, I was not ready to act on it. My phone was broken, so I couldn't film. I didn't have any money for materials, and I definitely didn't think we'd end up building it here. But I had a vision, and the first step to making it a reality came where I least expected. This Barnes & Noble used to be a second home to BMX riders from all over the area, myself included. Any given Tuesday, Thursday, or Sunday night, there was a guaranteed good session happening. This was the first time I ever went. It was 2017, and I had been riding for about 2 years at this point. This was about 2 years later in 2019, and it was the last time I ever rode the park. Unfortunately, it closed in 2020 and sat unused until February 2025 when I received a text. While battling the mini ramp, I found a 20-foot piece of angle iron and some perfect 2x6s. Then it dawned on me. Almost all the materials I needed to bring my ledge to life were right in front of me, and they were free. Checking that box put me one step closer to my goal, but I was still without a way to film. I got these clips by borrowing my friends' phones in case you're wondering. But once I collected all my materials, my project was back at a standstill. Until one day, a friend of mine saw me using this thing and gave me the last thing I needed to get started. His old iPhone 11. The first step was to address a problem I had with a previous build. When we poured this ramp, I made the coping ahead of time, placed it, and then we tried to pour up to it. That proved to be very difficult. No matter how hard we tried, we could never completely close the gap, which led to weak coping. Wanting to avoid that with this build, I came up with a new plan to do it right this time. It was a bit out of my comfort zone, but if I could pull it off, the coping would be bulletproof. I started with a 10-inch width, but cut it down to 7 inches to save concrete and open up more trick possibilities. A welder is not yet part of my arsenal, so I hit up my buddy Nick, and he welded it up for me. My design takes inspiration from these two setups, both in scale and the way they're ridden, but instead of transition, it'll have a wedge. If I do it right, I'll be able to wally up the wedge and be in the perfect position to ice hard 180. The other side won't have a wedge, but it will be grindable. I'm ripping one edge off of this 2x8 at an angle. The entire wedge side is going to branch off of this piece. With the length and the width of the top part known, I had to establish the rest of the shape. So I mocked up a profile, straight on one side and wedged on the other. If I don't get this angle right, the Wally Ice Hard won't work and the spot's gonna suck. I cut out a couple of them before I got one I liked. Once I had one that looked good, I cut one to match and built a straight side. Satisfied with how it was looking, I brought back that 2x8. Then I installed the top board and did my best to get it flush with the coping piece. Turns out, I didn't set the coping at the right height, so by doing this, I actually created more work for myself. With those to build off, the wedge pieces went in quickly. My form was now 90% done, which presented me with a new problem. Pouring this thing solid would take about 55 bags or 3,300 pounds of concrete. Even if I could afford that, I definitely couldn't haul it. So I had to figure out some type of fill. I could pile up rubble to fill the middle, but that could lead to uneven thickness. Uneven thickness could lead to a failure. Then I remembered something I've seen skatepark builders do, which gave me an idea. I wasn't sure if I could pull it off, but seeing as how I didn't have a choice, I decided to go for it. That led me to Home Depot in the work truck to gather supplies and make a mess in the parking lot. Gotta shout out high school geometry on this one. Couldn't have done it without you. These pieces are to unify the individual pieces of lumber.
And then reality hit me. I had been so focused on building the form that I hadn't even considered where I was going to pour the ledge.
If you're familiar with the writing of Stephen Pressfield, you're familiar with the concept of resistance. He defines it as an invisible, negative, and universal internal force that acts against human creativity and self-realization.
For me, in this case, resistance showed up as scouting for the perfect location. I got in a rut of letting any potential spots, imperfections, stop me from moving forward. Whether it was rough ground, lack of flat space, or citizen vigilantes who might take issue with my build, I always found a reason not to pull the trigger.
Deciding to add these was the only silver lining from the whole stint of procrastination. If I didn't, the whole obstacle would have turned out useless.
Eventually, I picked a spot with plenty of smooth, open space and zero risk of it getting demolished. Of course, no spot is perfect.
In this case, the drawback was the 3.5-hour drive to get there. But I was willing to put up with that because of all the other positives. I mean, come on, a city with no laws? I can't think of a better place to do construction without a permit. Once I arrived, I started prepping our chosen spot. Rather than put it on flat ground, I decided to split this drop, putting 4 feet of ledge on either side. Adding 6 inches of height to one side meant more volume, which meant more fill. I expected to pour about 2,400 pounds of concrete into the form. This foam, on the other hand, weighs about 10 pounds. If any of these pieces were to move or separate mid-pour, our ledge would turn into a 2,400-pound useless chunk of concrete. I had 2 things planned to prevent that from happening. This tape was the first one. The second would come after adapting the form to the new location. Here too I was going to have to make up the 6-inch gap at the bottom, while also making sure the top stays level. Extending the end panel seemed like the easiest place to start. Now for the side. Turns out the lower slab slopes down, so I was going to have to rip my bottom board at an angle. This skinny piece is going to come in handy in a minute. Volume-wise, I did the math for a consistent 6-inch drop. What we really had was a drop that starts at 6 inches and slopes down to 8 inches. I didn't realize at the time, but this was going to make it interesting when we got down to our last few bags of concrete. Now for the wedge side. The top one went in easy, the bottom one not so much. After finally getting that one to fit, I realized I wasn't quite done. Enter the skinny piece. I was about to pull the form, but first I marked both edges. A real common problem with DIY ramps is the seam where the ramp meets the ground chipping up. It happens because the concrete gets too thin where the ramp comes to a point. Now for part 2 of my plan for the foam. I'm setting these D-rings at 4 inches from the edge. These ones are right on the lip of the foam. That ain't going nowhere. With the last 20 minutes of daylight, I started one of the most important steps. I was hoping to finish all the prep this day, but unfortunately couldn't get it done. That meant I was going to have to wake up early the next morning and work even harder because I had people showing up at 8 a.m. to start pouring. Carlos went for a concrete run that night, maxed out his Ford Ranger, and came back with 32 60-pound bags. That plus my 6 and the 6 Nate was bringing put us at 44. Which I thought would be plenty. Unlike the other ledge I poured, I wanted to strip and finish this one. That meant the sooner we start pouring it, the sooner we could pull the form. This ledge is going to have a lot of forces acting on it, so I wanted to have as much tensile strength as possible. I would have liked to have a piece running the length on the backside, but I ran out. As I was wrapping that up, Nate showed up just in time to help me do some test fitting. We dialed in the rebar spacing and nailed down the form. We wanted to get started, but first we had to throw some ceremonial Molotovs.
And it won't burn your hand or start catching on fire on you. All right. Just race on it. Oh.
I hope those weren't a preview of how the pour was going to go. Nate and I started alone, but our crew doubled quickly as 2 Slab City locals, Blurt and Nerp, showed up. They ripped through like 3/4 of the bags, which allowed me to focus on getting the air pockets out of the form. I did so using this concrete vibrator. I would stick it all the way down to the ground until I saw concrete seeping out of the bottom edge. Once we got the form 90% full, it was time to execute my plan for the coping. And these things you saw me making earlier, they're magnets, and they're adjustable, so I can make sure the coping is perfectly set. Once that was set, we filled the rest of the void, which was only a few more bags. We mixed the concrete more on the wet side, so besides the part that was exposed to the sun, this thing was going to take a while to set up, and we were going to have to kill some time. If you ask me, killing time is the easiest part of doing concrete work. Unfortunately, we overachieved at that, and when we came back, the ledge was rock hard. Because of that, I started recklessly removing the form. My short-sighted loss of composure put the whole project at risk, and then it happened. I overlooked a screw, and we knocked loose a good-sized chunk from the back corner of the ledge. The damage wasn't irreparable, but we were going to have to do something quick. I froze. I didn't have the skills to fix it, but luckily, Nate did. At this point in the curing process, the concrete is insanely brittle. Nate's expertise finishing was invaluable in this moment. It looked like the crisis was averted, and we were going to be okay. At that point, I turned my attention to the wedge side. I wanted this to be as smooth as possible because it's the only part tires were going to touch. I was able to do that successfully, which meant my 2-day sprint at Slab City to make this thing a reality had come to an end. I thanked everyone involved and left it to cure with my mind set on a shower and a bed. I kept my distance to allow the ledge to go through the full curing process before being ridden, which was about 4 weeks.
All that was left to do at that point was to go back and answer the 2 questions I had in my mind. 1, will the ledge hold up, or will it fail under the stress of being ridden? And 2, will my design work for its intended purpose? Or in other words, did I build the perfect setup to wally ice hard?
In my absence, someone thought the ledge would look better with a bunch of spray paint all over it, which I expected. After a quick refresh, it was time to test it out.
Faster. Jesus Christ. There we go. There it is. It worked, and the ledge held up because we built it right the first time. If you want to see what you have to do when you don't build it right the first time, watch this video.